Krugman is still here. Also joining the fray are John Moulton, the venture capitalist and chairman of Better Capital, and Andrea Ledson, a Conservative MP who previously worked in finance for 25 years. You've given George Osborne quite a lot of earache about his handling of the economy. Have you seen anything while you've been over here to change your view?
No. I mean, we've now had about 2 years of experience with austerity here and elsewhere. And what we've seen, first of all, is that austerity really does contract the economy, that the notion that it would inspire business confidence and lead to expansion, not contraction, has been decisively proved wrong by experience all across Europe, including here, but even more so on the continent. And secondly, there's now growing evidence that austerity in these conditions doesn't even work in fiscal terms, because it shrinks the economy now and also shrinks the economy in future. It hurts the economy's long-run potential, which reduces future revenues, which worsens the long-run budget position. So this is not, I've used the analogy of it's like medieval doctors who thought that you could treat a sick patient by bleeding. And the patient, of course, got sicker, so they said, let's bleed even more. And that's essentially what's happening here. You say, we have a debt problem, which is real, but then the treatment is actually making things even worse, even in purely fiscal terms.
Okay. I mean, I don't know why you're shaking your head. This is a Nobel Prize-winning economist.
And, you know, I find his view reckless, frankly. I can't believe that somebody as, you know, as incredibly highly regarded could honestly think that the answer is to go and borrow more money. I mean, it is very simple mathematics, isn't it? If you are in a hole, if you've overspent and overspent, spending more is simply not going to help. It's going to make things worse. And you talk about austerity, but in reality, this is austerity light, as Ruth Lee was saying from the IEA. If you really wanted to sort our economy, you'd be doing it far faster, a much shorter, sharper hit to get us back rebounding much sooner than we can.
There are a lot of ways to try and answer that, but I think the main thing to say is, if you try to have a situation in which everyone is trying to slash at the same time, which the private sector is trying to slash spending because it feels it has too much debt, and in which then the government is also saying, well, we have too much debt, so we're all trying to slash, then we run up against the fundamental fact that we are not a household, we are an economy, and that your spending is my income, and my spending is your income. And if we are both trying to do this slashing at the same time, what we end up doing is producing a depression that leaves us worse off. And this is another great, so I'll give my 1930s American economist, the Irving Fisher, who was Keynes's contemporary, and said that in times like this, when everyone tries to pay down debt at the same time, what happens is the more people try to save, the more they owe. We're actually worsening the debt problem by not having the government act as the flywheel, the stabilizing factor, when the private sector is engaged in this ferocious deleveraging.
Right, John Moulton.
Even I struggle to attack a Nobel Prize winner, but I think you're really seriously wrong. The issue about austerity here is really we have too large a state. We've let the economy go from 30-odd% to pushing 50% public sector. If you want growth, you need a larger private sector, not a larger public sector. You're also ignoring, as your book does, I've just been reading it, waiting to come on, the very simple moral dimension of what you're recommending, which is that we run up more debt. The only thing that debt does enables us to live better today at the expense of those who follow us. That's quite a serious moral argument, and you cannot ignore it.
I actually would put the moral argument very differently. And I certainly look at the U.S., and it's true here as well. If I think about the future generation, I think that the crime we are committing against the next generation is not that we're going to leave them with more debt. That's a venial sin. The crime is that all of these students are graduating from college with no job prospects, are graduating from college with debts they've incurred to get an expensive education, and then there are no jobs. That damage that we are inflicting, the damage we are inflicting on the next generation by not having jobs for them, which is the result of misguided austerity right now, that is the great sin.
Those jobs will be generated when people move from the public sector to the private sector.
What we need to be doing is really making it easier for young people to start their own business businesses, making it far, far easier for new entrepreneurs. I mean, you say we have to give them jobs, create jobs. We shouldn't be about creating jobs. We should be about enabling the economy to create jobs by low tax regime, opportunities for people to start up new businesses and so on, not by creating jobs.
The average young person is not going to start a business. There has to be an expanding economy, which is not happening, and it's not happening because we're not providing the necessary support. And by the way, I think you've just given me confirmation of something that people like me tend to say, which is that actually none of this is at all about fiscal responsibility. It's all about exploiting the current situation to pursue an ideological goal of a smaller state. And, we can argue about whether the British state is too large, but look at Sweden, which is actually weathering this very well with a much larger state than you have. So that's a great diversion. That's suggesting that you're not actually sincere. It's not really the budget deficits that concern you. You're looking for a way to exploit this deficit situation
to pursue an agenda. Wrong, and you accuse us of lying.
No, I think it's probably just that you're mingling together concepts that are really quite separate.
There is very clear economic evidence, which even you must accept absolutely as evidence. It's not theory. That on average, larger public sectors grow slower than smaller ones.
No, I actually don't accept that at all. We can have that discussion, but we need some equations and charts to do that. But no, it's just not true. And that's a very distinct issue.
So Mr. Afonso's study is rubbish?
No, just leave the question. The question of size of the state and the question of what one should be doing right now to deal with this crisis ought to be quite separate. And the trouble is...
But surely there has to be a point that you can either expand your private sector by making it easier for the private sector to expand, or you can expand your public sector, and the only way to do that is by removing wealth from the private sector to put into the public sector.
You're totally missing the point of what it means to be in a depression. I have a book,
We're not in a depression.
We are in a depression where there are vast numbers of workers idle who want to work. There's vast amounts of potential capital which is going nowhere because there's no demand. So at this point in time, the private and the public sector are not competing for resources. There are these unemployed resources, and the point is to put them to work. Now, give me a recovery in the UK or in the US, and I will become a fiscal hawk. I will be very happy to talk about finding ways to economize on government spending, finding ways to raise more revenue, which I think, at least in the US, has to be part of the solution, but not now, not under these conditions.
Don't you think, though, that efforts to reduce corporation taxes, to deregulate, to make it easier to start new companies, to put banks into a position to lend more to SMEs, don't you think that those measures to actually improve the private sector element of the economy are going to have more impact than simply borrowing more money to create jobs and throw money into the economy and increase debt?
We have survey evidence from the United States about what it is that is holding private businesses back. And overwhelmingly, the answer is lack of sales. There just is not enough demand. Constraints on capital are not an issue. Constraints, yes, they would like to have more skilled workers, but no more so than usual. Issues about financing are a small issue. Concerns about future government regulations, well, they always complain about that, but no more than usual. What has changed is there's no demand. There isn't a market there, and that's what these austerity policies are making worse. They're actually inhibiting the private sector as well as the public.
Not all austerity policies have failed, have they? Some have actually prospered.
Every one of those success stories turns out to involve either a situation where interest rates were quite high to start with, so you could bring them down, or a situation where you had a large currency devaluation, which is not going to work now because you have to have some prosperous economy to devalue against, and there's nobody out there right now.
There's a clear example, Estonia.
Yeah, that just doesn't fit the story at all.
I don't think we've got the evidence on the Estonia example, and I don't think we've got time to go into it either. Thank you.
I'd love to.
I'm sure you will. You must come back and do that. Tell us all about the Estonian economy. Thank you all very much. Thanks.